My name is Lena Petrova, and I am being courted via a campaign of sustained medical fraud. The perpetrator is the Alpha King himself, Alistair Thorne, though I suspect the man and the wolf have not discussed strategy, because the wolf is doing all the work and the man is doing all the apologizing. I am the territory's only independent animal healer. I set the broken wings of sparrows, dose feverish calves on the outer farms, and wrap the sprained paws of loyal, hard-working sheepdogs. I am good at my job. My competence is the one solid thing in a life I've deliberately kept quiet and small. I do not treat wolves. Wolves have a pack healer, a stern woman named Elspeth with hands like weathered stone and a patience thinner than ice in spring. The jurisdictional lines are clear. Alistair Thorne's wolf, however, does not recognize the concept of jurisdiction. Now, I should explain something about the Alpha King. He is, by all accounts, the most controlled shifter in the territory. He can hold his human form through rage, through grief, through a full council meeting with his most insufferable lords. His control is the kind that becomes legend. Marcus Vance, his long-suffering beta, once told me that in 15 years of service, he had never once seen the king shift involuntarily. Then I walked across the courtyard. It happened on a Tuesday. I was crossing the castle's main cobblestones, my satchel heavy with poultices for a lame draft horse in the east stable. Alistair was on the grand portico with Marcus, reviewing guard rotations. I know this because Marcus told me later, in the weary tone of a man who has seen too much. What happened, according to Marcus? Mid-sentence, the king stopped talking. His eyes tracked something across the courtyard. Me, apparently, though I was doing nothing more interesting than existing. And then, without warning or dignity, the most controlled alpha in living memory shifted. Right there on the portico. His clothes didn't survive. They never do. What I saw. I was halfway across the courtyard when an enormous wolf appeared at the top of the portico steps. Silver gray fur, amber eyes, 800 pounds of coiled power. He was magnificent. And he was limping. A sudden, theatrical limp in his back right leg that turned the great predator into a tragic, wounded creature. He hauled himself down the steps, his amber eyes wide with feigned agony, casting pathetic glances in my direction. My heart leapt into my throat. An injured alpha wolf was a crisis. I dropped my satchel and ran. Marcus, still standing on the portico holding a guard roster and the shredded remains of the king's shirt, looked like a man seriously reconsidering his career. I skidded to a halt beside the wolf and dropped to my knees. He immediately rested his massive head on my knee and whimpered. It was a good whimper, full-bodied, with a little trill of suffering at the end. I ran my hands down the leg. No heat, no swelling. I manipulated the joints. He didn't so much as flinch. In fact, I felt the faint vibration of a pleased rumble starting in his chest. A purr. An 800-pound wolf was purring. He seems fine, I said, perplexed, looking up at Marcus. And then the wolf shifted back. One moment I was kneeling beside a mountain of silver fur. The next, Alistair Thorne was crouching on the cobblestones in front of me, very human, very naked, and very red in the face. Marcus, with the reflexes of a man who had clearly begun preparing for exactly this, threw a cloak over his king's shoulders. I apologize, Healer Petrova, Alistair said, clutching the cloak around himself with what remained of his dignity. I don't know what that was. I knew what it was. My own wolf. A quiet, pragmatic voice in the back of my mind delivered a clipped report. Subject, Alpha King Alistair Thorne. Condition, involuntary shift triggered by proximity to us. The wolf is acting on instinct the human is refusing to acknowledge. Probability of genuine injury, 0%. She paused. His wolf has good taste. Recommendation, observe. That last part was new. My wolf didn't usually editorialize. I couldn't ignore it. What if I was wrong? My entire life was built on not being wrong about an animal's pain. So the next week when it happened again, this time in the armory, where Alistair had been inspecting new steel, before his body apparently decided that wolf form was more productive, I attended. The wolf developed a deep, rattling cough that echoed magnificently off the stone walls. He hacked and wheezed only when he was looking directly at me. The performance stopped the second I placed my stethoscope on his chest. His heart rate was perfect, his breathing clear. He wagged his tail through the entire examination. When he shifted back, wrapped hastily in Marcus's ever-ready spare cloak, his jaw was tight with embarrassment. "This doesn't usually happen," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "I have excellent control." "Your wolf wants attention," I said, packing my things. "He's the alpha wolf. He has the world's attention." "He wants my attention," I clarified, my voice flat. Something flickered in his eyes, not embarrassment this time, but a raw, unguarded honesty that he immediately buried. "Yes," he said quietly, "he does." He didn't say, "And so do I," but the silence said it for him. My wolf filed a brief update. The human is aware of his wolf's objectives and is not actively obstructing them. He is merely too stubborn to participate. Also, his shifted form is well proportioned. This is noted for the record. "Are you annotating his physique?" I asked my wolf internally. Observation is the foundation of good medicine. The involuntary shifts grew more frequent. Marcus began carrying a bag with a spare set of the king's clothes at all times. The castle staff developed an extraordinary collective ability to look elsewhere, a thorn in the paw, which required me to inspect all 4 of his enormous thornless feet, while he sighed contentedly. A mysterious rash on his belly that was just fur. Each time the pattern was the same. Alistair would be going about his business, I would appear, and his body would betray him. In the training yard one morning, as I crossed toward the east stables, I watched 3 young pack wolves sparring in their shifted forms, a tangle of fur and playful growls that scattered the chickens from the adjacent coop. One of them, a lanky gray yearling, broke off to shake mud from his coat before shifting back, laughing and breathless, reaching for the clothes pile by the fence. Shifting was ordinary for them, easy, like breathing, the casual way they moved between forms. Wolf to spar, human to joke, wolf again to chase a friend who'd stolen their boot, made Alistair's rigid control look less like strength and more like a man holding his breath his entire life. Training the fainting spell. I was in the market, buying herbs, when a panicked guard found me. The alpha wolf had collapsed in the training grounds. I ran, my heart pounding with that same stupid fear. I found him sprawled in the middle of the packed earth, a mountain of motionless silver fur. The entire on-duty guard was standing around him in a panicked circle. I skidded to a halt, dropped to my knees, and began my assessment. And then I saw it. One of his amber eyes was cracked open, just a sliver, watching me. When he saw I was looking, the eye snapped shut. An 800-pound apex predator, the most powerful wolf on the continent, the king of the entire territory, had just fake fainted for me. A sound escaped my throat, something between a laugh and a choke. Marcus, who had arrived with the spare clothes bag, pinched the bridge of his nose. "He's faking," I said, standing up and dusting off my trousers. "Your king is an accomplished actor." The wolf, sensing the jig was up, sighed dramatically and rose to his feet. He shifted back, and this time I was ready, averting my eyes while Marcus performed the cloak maneuver with practiced efficiency. "I was trying not to shift," Alistair said, his voice strained as he knotted the cloak. "I saw you coming, and I told myself, not this time, and then—" He gestured helplessly at himself. My wolf offered another assessment. Subject's involuntary shifting is accelerating. His wolf is overriding 15 years of disciplined control because the logical human refuses to simply walk up to the woman and speak to her. The wolf has concluded that direct action is required. Methods are unorthodox, commitment level is high. She paused again. We respect the commitment. We, I thought. You and I are in agreement on this matter. He is interesting. His wolf is persistent. This is an admirable quality in a potential. Stop, I told my wolf firmly. She went quiet, but the silence felt distinctly smug. I thought that was the peak of the absurdity. I was wrong. The absurdity was about to go conscious. It happened a week later. I was in my small clinic on the edge of the castle town, a converted stable that always smelled of hay and antiseptic. My patient was a farm dog named Patches, a sweet-natured mutt with a genuinely broken leg. I was carefully setting the bone when the door creaked open. It was Alistair, alone, in his human form, fully clothed. He was holding his left arm against his chest, his handsome face pinched in a fair approximation of pain. Patches, despite his injury, thumped his tail against the floor in greeting to the king. "Your Majesty," I said, surprised. I carefully finished wrapping the splint on Patch's leg. "Can I help you?" "I think I pulled something," he said. His voice was laced with a pained grimace that was, to my practiced eye, entirely counterfeit. In training. I finished with Patches, giving the good boy a gentle scratch behind the ears. Then I turned my full attention to the king of all werewolves. I looked at his arm. I looked at his face, and my brain froze. He was making the wolf's face. His own wolf's face. The exact same wide-eyed, slightly pathetic, trying too hard to look brave through the pain expression that his wolf form had perfected over the past month. Except now, he was doing it on purpose. In human form. Fully clothed and fully conscious because the wolf's method had worked and his logical brain had finally caught up. My wolf broke her silence with a single odd observation. The human has adopted the wolf's tactics. He has studied his own involuntary behavior and is now replicating it deliberately. She sounded almost proud. This is unprecedented. We are witnessing evolution. "You're not hurt," I said, my voice devoid of inflection. "It's very painful," he insisted. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, not pain, but a desperate sort of hope. It was the same look I saw in stray dogs who weren't sure if you had a rock or a piece of bread in your hand. I sighed. It was a long, weary sound that came from the depths of my soul. I was a healer. My hands knew how to fix things. It was the only way I knew how to interact with the world. He knew it. His wolf knew it. They were weaponizing my own nature against me, except they were the same person, which made it somehow worse. "Where?" I asked, the word flat. A slow smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was a small, triumphant thing. "Wherever you want to check." Something warm and entirely inconvenient bloomed in my chest. I crushed it. I picked up a roll of clean linen bandages. "Let me see the grievous injury, Your Majesty." He held out his perfectly toned, utterly uninjured arm. I ran my fingers over the muscle, feeling for any sign of a strain, a tear, a knot. There was nothing but healthy tissue and the warmth of his skin. His breath hitched when I touched him. His heart rate, I could hear it pick up. A strong, steady beat that sped up under my fingertips. He wasn't hurt, but he wasn't calm either. I was the one causing the symptom. I wrapped his forearm in a neat, professional bandage, not too tight, not too loose. A perfect, pointless dressing. "There," I said, securing the end. "Try not to exert yourself." He looked down at the bandage, then back at me, his eyes dark and serious. "Thank you, Lena," he said, using my first name for the first time. "I feel better already." He kept the bandage on for 3 days. He displayed it like a trophy, a king who had won a war, and this was his medal. The pack wolves smirked behind their hands. Marcus developed a permanent furrow between his brows, and my wolf, unbidden, offered a quiet thought as I watched him cross the market square, bandaged arm held just slightly higher than necessary, looking pleased with himself. He is ridiculous. I like him. I didn't argue. The next morning, Marcus Vance appeared at my clinic door. "Healer Petrova," he said, his tone one of polite exhaustion. "The king requires your presence in the throne room." "Is he injured again?" "He claims his other arm is now experiencing sympathy pains for the first one." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. He also said, and I quote, "Only Lena's hands can diagnose it properly." He was entirely in human form when he said it, which means he can't even blame the wolf. My wolf's voice was dry as dust. Tactical escalation confirmed. The human is now operating independently of involuntary shifting. He is targeting the opposing limb under his own volition. This is resourceful. We approve. When I entered the throne room, it was empty save for Alistair, who sat on the massive carved throne looking deeply uncomfortable. He was in human form, deliberately this time I could tell, because he had that rigid quality of a man concentrating very hard on staying in one shape. He was trying to look regal and wounded at the same time. It wasn't working. He just looked like a man fighting his own body. I walked up to the dais. I didn't bow. I wasn't a courtier. I was a healer, and he was my patient. My very fraudulent patient. "Show me," I said. He held out his right arm. I took it. His skin was warm, his pulse reactive. I unwrapped the bandage from his left arm first. "This one seems to have made a full recovery," I noted, my voice deadpan. "A miracle," he breathed. But I noticed a fine tremor running through him, the wolf pushing, the shift pulling. My touch was the trigger and the anchor, the very thing that made his wolf want to surface, and the thing that made the man want to stay. I pressed my fingers into his bicep, his forearm. It was impossible to ignore the solid reality of him, the way his muscles tensed under my hand, the low, unconscious sound he made in the back of his throat. "I find nothing wrong, Your Majesty." "Perhaps you should check again, more thoroughly." I dropped his arm. "No, I have actual patience." The humor in his eyes vanished, replaced by something serious. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, it's just, this is the only way I can get you to stand still for 5 minutes." My breath caught. My wolf went very quiet, then said simply, "He is telling the truth. He does not know another way to reach you. His wolf has been trying. The human is trying now. This matters." "I'm not a court lady," I said, my voice tight. "I don't do this." "I know," he repeated softer. He stood up, towering over me. "That's why it has to be you, Lena. You don't look at the throne, you look at the man, and you see right through him." I should have left. Instead, I heard myself say, "Your wolf has a chronic condition, Your Majesty." He blinked. "What?" "Atypical lupine neurology," I said, the lie forming on my lips with terrifying ease. "An intermittent neurological affliction that affects the shift regulation pathways. It can cause involuntary transformations, phantom pains, even collapse. It requires careful daily management by a specialist." I paused, letting the weight of my bullshit settle in the room. "Fortunately, that is my area of expertise. I will need to see you every morning and every evening." His eyes went wide. Then his mouth twitched. Then a grin broke across his face like dawn. "That sounds very serious." "Extremely," I said. "The treatment involves foul-smelling liniment and a great deal of me telling you to stop being an idiot." "I accept the diagnosis," he said, his voice full of laughter he was barely containing. "When do we start?" My wolf delivered a final assessment. "You have just voluntarily committed to touching this man twice a day for the foreseeable future. You did this on purpose. I want this noted for the record. My new life began the next morning." I arrived at the king's private chambers at dawn, armed with a bottle of liniment I used on arthritic horses. Marcus met me at the door. "He's been waiting for you," Marcus said. He canceled his morning spar, said his neurology was acting up. He also shifted twice before breakfast, once when a maid mentioned your name, and once when he smelled the herbs from your clinic on the morning breeze. Marcus paused. "I am running out of spare shirts." Alistair was standing by his balcony in simple trousers and a linen shirt, freshly dressed, since the previous set had not survived his morning. He turned when I entered, and the smile he gave me was private and warm. "Good morning, Lena. How is my condition today?" "Severe," I said, setting my satchel down. I produced the liniment. "This promotes circulation." He eyed the bottle. "It smells like a bog." "It's very therapeutic. Arm, please." He rolled up his sleeve. The daily ritual began. I would massage the liniment into his arm, my touch firm and professional. But the clinical nature of the act was a fiction. I was intensely aware of him, the heat of his skin, the way his breathing changed under my hands. And I could feel the shift pulling at him, a fine tremor beneath his skin, a flash of amber at the edge of his irises that he blinked away. He was concentrating so hard on staying human that a vein stood out in his temple. My touch was the thing that made his wolf want to surface, and the thing that made the man want to stay. My wolf watched all of this with keen attention. His heart rate elevates 22% when you touch the inside of his wrist. This is noted. Why is that noted, I thought? For science. The daily treatments became our routine. Mornings were quiet, still half asleep, the liniment's terrible smell filling his chambers while the sun rose. Evenings were different. His duties were done. The castle was quiet. We talked. He asked about my patients, about the chemistry of my remedies. He was genuinely curious. He listened, his head tilted, his gaze intent. No one had ever been this interested in the mundane details of my life. I learned things about him, too, that he hated the pomp of the court, that his father had been a hard man who saw the wolf as something to master, not something to be, that Alistair had spent his youth learning control the way other children learn to read, relentlessly, with punishment for failure, that he sometimes felt the crown was a mask he couldn't take off. "Everyone looks at the Alpha King," he told me one evening, his voice low as I wrapped a fresh, pointless bandage on his arm. "They see the power, the title. They don't see the man who has no idea what he's doing half the time." "They should," I said softly. "The man is better than the king." He looked at me like I'd handed him something he didn't know he needed. My wolf, who had been listening quietly, said, "He is lonely. Not in the way people notice. In the way that a wolf who has never been allowed to run carries it in his body. We know this kind of loneliness." She was right. I knew it in my bones. One morning, after the treatment, Alistair stopped me. "Wait." He gestured to the table where a beautifully wrapped package sat. "This is for you." Inside was a satchel, snow-white leather, royal crest in gold leaf, polished silver buckles, and a strap hung with glittering jewels that tinkled like tiny bells. It was the most beautiful, opulent, and utterly useless thing I had ever seen. My own satchel was a tool, stained and scarred with the stories of 100 rescued animals. This was a crown for a bag. "It's a lot," I managed. He looked crestfallen. "You don't like it?" "It's impractical. The white leather would be stained in a day. The jewels would scare the calves. It's too heavy." I stopped myself. "It's very beautiful, Alistair, but it's not me." His face fell. "Oh. My satchel is part of my work. It's supposed to be messy. Every mark on it is a life I helped." He looked at my old satchel, really looked at it, and I watched understanding cross his face. He didn't argue. He just nodded, slowly, and said, "I see." My wolf, unexpectedly gentle. He tried. He was wrong, but he tried. Give him time. He is learning to see you. Most people never bother. The shift happened. Not a physical one, but a tectonic one. On the day I decided to stop pretending. It was an evening treatment, 3 weeks into our routine. I was massaging the liniment into his forearm, and his eyes were half closed, his breathing slow. The tremor was there, faint, but he was managing it. I had become his anchor. I knew the exact pressure that settled him, the precise spot where the tension in his forearm unknotted. I knew that if I pressed my thumb into the center of his palm, his breath would catch. I knew that if I let my fingers trail up past his wrist to the sensitive skin at the inside of his elbow, his eyes would flash amber and his whole body would go very, very still. I knew these things because I had been cataloging them, clinically, professionally, for science, as my wolf would say. And on that evening, I let my fingers trail past his wrist. His eyes snapped open, full amber for just a second before he pulled them back. His breathing had stopped entirely. "Lena," he said, his voice rough. "What are you doing?" "Checking your circulation," I said, my voice perfectly steady, my hand perfectly still against the inside of his elbow where his pulse was hammering. "It's part of the treatment." "That has never been part of the treatment." "I've updated the treatment." We stared at each other. His eyes were dark, intense, and I could see the question forming, the one he was too controlled, too careful, too well-trained to ask. My wolf, who had been growing increasingly impatient with the pace of human courtship, delivered an exasperated directive. "He will not make the first move. He has been trained out of it. You will need to be clearer, significantly clearer." So I was clearer. "Your pulse is elevated," I told him, my thumb still on that hammering beat. 112 beats per minute. That's high, even for you. "I wonder why," he managed. "I have a theory," I said, and I watched his pupils dilate. "I think your condition may be more serious than I initially diagnosed." "How serious?" "I may need to extend the treatments." I let my voice drop, just slightly. "More thorough examinations. Possibly twice daily monitoring of your vital signs." He exhaled, a long, shaky breath, and a laugh broke through it. "You," he said, his voice caught between desire and delight, "are diagnosing me with feelings." "I'm diagnosing you with an elevated heart rate, Your Majesty." "The cause is a separate clinical question." "And what is the cause, in your professional opinion?" I looked him dead in the eye. Me. The smile that broke across his face was worth every awkward morning, every fake injury, every terrible bottle of horse liniment. He leaned forward, his hand coming up to cover mine where it rested against his arm, his fingers lacing through mine. "That," he said softly, "is the most accurate diagnosis you've ever given." My wolf delivered her assessment in a tone of deep satisfaction. "Finally, you may proceed." After that, it was war, but the good kind. He showed up at my clinic the next day, unscheduled, fully clothed, no visible injuries, carrying a single wildflower he'd clearly picked from the castle garden. He held it out like a man presenting state credentials. "For your clinic," he said. "I noticed it doesn't have any color." "It's a stable. It's not supposed to have color." "Everything should have color," he said, and placed it in an empty tincture bottle on my workbench. "My wolf. He brings offerings now. Small ones. This is correct behavior. We accept." The next morning, during his treatment, I wore my hair down instead of in its usual practical braid. I never wore my hair down. It got in the way. But I had noticed, during our weeks of proximity, that when a loose strand escaped my braid, his eyes would track it, and his hand would twitch, and his pulse would do that thing. He noticed. His hand trembled on the armrest. "Your hair is different," I said innocently, leaning forward to examine his perfectly healthy shoulder, letting my hair brush his arm. "Different," he repeated, his voice strangled. His eyes went amber. He gripped the armrest so hard the wood creaked. He did not shift. It cost him, visibly. I hid my smile in his shoulder. My wolf purred. He escalated. The next day, he arrived for his evening treatment, having just come from sparring, still in his training shirt, the linen damp and clinging to every line of him. He did not usually come to treatments from sparring. He usually bathed and changed first. He was a king. He had standards. "Sorry," he said, not sorry at all. "I didn't have time to change." "That's fine," I said, my voice admirably steady as I pressed my stethoscope to his very muscular, very visible chest. "Deep breaths." He breathed deeply. I listened to nothing because there was nothing wrong with him. My wolf offered a detailed physiological assessment that I will not be repeating because it was deeply unprofessional. I escalated back. During the next morning's treatment, I accidentally spilled liniment on his hand and cleaned it off with a cloth, slowly, finger by finger, holding eye contact the entire time. "You missed a spot," he whispered, his voice wrecked. "Where?" He turned his hand over, baring his palm. "Here." I cleaned the non-existent spot with the pad of my thumb, pressing gently into the center of his palm. His eyes closed. His breathing went ragged. The shift tremor ran through him, and for once he didn't fight it. He just let it pass through, a shudder that was almost a sigh. "Better?" I asked. "Worse," he said. "Much worse. I think you're going to need to see me 3 times a day." "That seems medically excessive." "I have a very serious condition." "You have a condition I made up. And I've never been more grateful for a fake diagnosis in my life." We were both grinning like idiots. Marcus, who had opened the door to deliver a message and then immediately closed it again, could be heard walking away while muttering something about a raise. The courtship became a language. He would bring me things, not jeweled satchels, not anymore, small things. A jar of the specific honey I used in poultices, sourced from a beekeeper 3 villages away. A book on equine anatomy he'd found in the castle library, with passages marked that he thought I'd find interesting. A new whetstone for my surgical knives, because he'd noticed mine was wearing thin. Practical things. Things that said, "I see what you need." My wolf kept a running tally. Gift analysis, 12 offerings to date. Relevance to our work, 100%. Ostentation level, 0. Trend, marked improvement from initial satchel disaster. Assessment, subject is trainable. I courted him back. Not with gifts, I had nothing to offer a king, but with the thing I was good at, touch. I extended the treatments. I found new, entirely fabricated reasons to examine him. I invented a secondary assessment protocol that involved me pressing my ear to his back to listen for irregularities in his shift resonance patterns. This was complete nonsense. He knew it was complete nonsense. He held perfectly still and breathed when I told him to breathe. And neither of us acknowledged that what I was actually doing was resting my cheek against his warm skin and listening to his heartbeat. "How's the resonance?" he'd murmur. "Irregular," I'd whisper back. "Very concerning. I'll need to monitor this closely." "Whatever it takes, Healer Petrova." In the evenings, walking back from the stables where I'd done my rounds, I would see him on the battlements, still working, and I'd stop. He'd look down. We'd hold each other's gaze for a beat too long, across the entire courtyard, and I would feel the distance between us like a pulled thread. My wolf, who had abandoned all pretense of clinical detachment, would simply say, "Go to him." And I would think, "Not yet." And she would say, "Coward." And I would agree. One evening, crossing the courtyard at dusk, I heard the pack wolves heading out for a night run, a stream of shifted forms pouring out of the pack house. A dozen wolves of every size and color, their paws thundering on the cobblestones. They flowed around me like a river around a stone, and the sound of their breathing, the heat of their bodies, the wild joy of them pulled at something in my chest that I'd been ignoring for years. My own wolf stirred, not with a clinical report, but with a longing so sharp it felt like hunger. I hadn't shifted in 3 years. I was a wolf who had forgotten how to run. The almost kiss happened on a rainy Thursday. The evening treatment was finished, but neither of us moved. Rain drummed against the windows, the fire crackled. His chamber smelled like wet stone and horse liniment, and him, the clean, earthy scent that was uniquely Alistair, the one I had memorized without meaning to. He was looking at me the way he'd been looking at me for weeks, like I was a problem he couldn't solve and didn't want to. I was still holding his hand, my thumb tracing slow circles on his palm, because I had given up pretending the treatments were clinical. They were just us, finding excuses to touch each other. "Lena," he said, and his voice was different, lower, no humor in it. "Alistair, I want to kiss you." My heart slammed against my ribs. "That's not part of the treatment protocol. I'm not asking as your patient." The air between us was charged, electric. I could feel his pulse under my thumb, fast and strong. I could see the amber bleeding into his irises, not a loss of control, not anymore, but the wolf surfacing to be present for this. Both halves of him in agreement, wanting the same thing. I leaned in. He leaned in. And then his control slipped. A shudder ran through him, his eyes going full amber, and the shift started. The tremor in his shoulders, the ripple under his skin. He caught himself, barely, teeth gritted, and hauled himself back by sheer will. But the moment broke. He jerked away, breathing hard, hands fisted. "Every time," he said, his voice raw with frustration. "Every time I get close, It's all right," I started. "It's not all right," he said, and the anguish in his voice cut through me. My father spent years teaching me that this, the loss of control, was the worst thing an alpha could be. And now I can't even kiss a woman without proving him right. The room went quiet. The rain was the only sound. "Your father was wrong," I said. He looked at me. "Your wolf isn't losing control, Alistair. Your wolf is the most honest part of you. It knew before you did. It embarrassed you in public, it faked injuries, it ruined Marcus's entire wardrobe, because the logical, careful, controlled part of you was never going to walk across that courtyard and talk to me. Your wolf did what you wouldn't." I stepped closer. "That's not weakness. That's your own heart refusing to be ignored." He stared at me. The amber faded from his eyes, leaving them dark and human and impossibly vulnerable. "How do you always do that?" he said, his voice rough. "Do what?" "See exactly what I need to hear." My wolf, very quietly, Tell him why you see it. Tell him what you are." Not yet, I thought. And she didn't argue. But she didn't agree either. Instead of kissing him, I did something that felt just as dangerous. I reached up and put my hand on his cheek, my palm against his jaw, my thumb at the corner of his mouth. He went completely still. Not the stillness of control, the stillness of a man afraid that if he moved, the good thing would disappear. "Tomorrow," I said. "We'll try again tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he repeated, like a promise. I left his chambers and made it all the way to the stairwell before I pressed my back against the cold stone wall and exhaled. "My wolf, your heart rate is 134 beats per minute. Your pupils are dilated. Your skin temperature is elevated. In my professional opinion, you have it bad." "Shut up," I said aloud, to no one, in an empty corridor of the king's castle. She did not shut up. She purred. Tomorrow came. I arrived at dawn as usual, but something had changed. He was standing by the balcony again, watching the sunrise, but when he turned, he didn't perform the usual ritual. The joking complaint about his condition, the extended arm, the back and forth. Instead, he just looked at me. "I didn't shift this morning," he said. I set my satchel down slowly. "Not once?" "Not once. I thought about you. I even smelled the liniment on the breeze." A faint smile. I stayed human. I should have been pleased. This was progress. His control was returning. Instead, I felt something cold and unexpected settle in my chest. Because his involuntary shifts had been the bridge between us, the excuse, the reason, the diagnosis I'd invented to keep us close. If his wolf went quiet— "That's good," I said, and I heard the lie in my own voice. He heard it too. His eyes sharpened. The treatments continued that week, but they felt different. He was calm, controlled. The tremor was gone. His eyes stayed human. He sat for the liniment and the bandages with perfect stillness, and the easy, charged intimacy of the past weeks had been replaced by something careful and distant. He was being polite, appropriate, kingly. He was, I realized with growing horror, pulling back. His control had returned, and with it, the walls. The man who had learned from his father that the wolf was weakness had looked at what his wolf had done, the public shifts, the fake injuries, the spectacle, and was now overcorrecting. Being sensible, being the kind of king who didn't make a fool of himself for a healer. By Thursday, the treatments felt like a formality. He barely spoke. His arm was extended, the liniment was applied, and we performed the fiction of medicine in silence. My wolf had gone uncharacteristically quiet too, not smug, not clinical, just sad. "Assessment," she finally said, and her voice was small. "The subject is retreating. He has reinterpreted the involuntary shifts as a loss of dignity rather than as honest communication. He is ashamed of what his wolf did for us." She paused. "This is the worst outcome." I packed my satchel after the Friday evening treatment, my chest tight, my eyes burning with something I refused to let fall. "Same time tomorrow?" I asked, because we were still pretending. "Actually," he said, and his voice was measured, careful. "I've been thinking. The involuntary shifts have stopped. My condition seems to be resolved. Perhaps the treatments are no longer necessary." There it was, the sensible thing. The controlled, logical, kingly thing. My wolf made a sound I had never heard from her, a low whine, animal and heartbroken. "Of course," I said, and my voice didn't break because I was Lena Petrova, and my voice didn't break. "I'm glad the treatment was effective, Your Majesty." Your Majesty, not Alistair. He heard the difference. Something moved behind his eyes, pain or regret, or the wolf trying to surface one more time and being held down. "Lena. Good night, Your Majesty." I left before he could finish. I left before the burning in my eyes became something visible. 3 days passed. I returned to my old life. Sparrows with broken wings, feverish calves, sprained paws. My clinic smelled the same. My satchel was the same. Everything was the same. Nothing was the same. I missed him. I missed the absurd ritual of it, the terrible liniment, the fake bandages, the escalating flirtation that had become the best part of my day. I missed the warmth of his skin under my hands. I missed his laugh. I missed the way my wolf would annotate his vital signs like she was writing a research paper on how he made us feel. My wolf had retreated to a deep, quiet place. She hadn't spoken in 2 days. When I finally reached for her, she responded with a single, exhausted thought. "You are both idiots. You deserve each other." I mean that as a compliment. On the 4th morning, I was stitching up a barn cat named General Whiskers when the clinic door creaked open. I looked up. and I stopped breathing. Alistair stood in the doorway. He was in human form. He was fully clothed. He was not carrying his arm against his chest or wincing or performing any approximation of injury. He was holding a wildflower, the same kind he'd brought before, and he was standing there with an expression I had never seen on him. Not the wolf's pathetic face, not the king's composure, not the charming flirt or the careful politician. He looked terrified, completely, openly, humanly terrified. "I'm not hurt," he said. "I can see that. I don't have a condition. I know, I made it up. I know you made it up." He took a breath. "I'm not here because my wolf made me come. He's quiet. He's been quiet all week. I'm here because I walked here, in human form, with full control, because I wanted to see you, and I'm done pretending I have a medical reason for it." The clinic was very quiet. General Whiskers purred on the table between us. "I was wrong to pull away," he said, and his voice cracked on the word wrong in a way that made my chest hurt. My father's voice in my head said the shifts were undignified, and the wanting was weakness, and a king doesn't chase a woman across a courtyard because his heart won't let him walk the other way. And I listened, because I've always listened to that voice. It was easier to be controlled than to be honest. He set the wildflower on my workbench. "I don't want to be controlled anymore. I want to be honest. And the honest truth, Lena, is that my wolf was right from the very first day. You are the reason I can't hold my shape. Not because you make me lose control, because you make me not want to hold on so tight." My wolf came back online, not with a report, not with an assessment, with a single word, delivered with the quiet certainty of a creature who had known all along. Yes. I stood up from my stool. I crossed the 3 feet of clinic floor between us. I reached up, took his face in both my hands, and kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't careful. It was a kiss that said, "I see you, all of you, the wolf who faked a limp and the man who faked a pulled muscle, and the king who almost let his father's ghost ruin the best thing that ever happened to him." I kissed him, and he kissed me back, and his arms came around me, and for once, for the first time, there was no tremor, no flash of amber, no shift threatening to take him away from the moment. He was fully, completely, deliberately human, and he was choosing to be here. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "No more fake injuries?" I whispered. "I can't promise that," he said, his lips brushing mine. "The wolf has a proven methodology." I laughed, a real, helpless, joyful laugh, and he caught it with another kiss, and another, and another. My wolf, her voice warm and satisfied and deeply, insufferably smug. Diagnosis confirmed. Prognosis? Excellent. Treatment? Ongoing. Indefinitely. It happened on a moonlit night 2 weeks later. We were on the battlements, listening to the pack wolves run below, their howls threading through the dark. His arm was around me, my head against his shoulder. It was the kind of quiet that only happens between 2 people who have stopped performing. Below us, the pack flowed through the trees like a silver river, and the ache in my chest was so sharp I made a sound without meaning to. He looked down at me. "When was the last time you ran?" 3 years, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. After my mother died, the wolf felt too much. Everything was louder, sharper, more raw. So I stayed human. I buried myself in work, in the clinic, in being useful with my hands instead of my instincts. I swallowed. I forgot what it felt like to run. His arm tightened around me. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't say he was sorry. He said, "Run with me." My wolf, who had been curled in that deep, quiet place for 3 years, lifted her head. "I don't know if I remember how," I said, and I meant more than the mechanics. "You don't have to remember," he said. "You just have to let go." He smiled, and there was something raw in it. I'm told that's the hardest part. I had a very good healer explain that to me once. He stepped back and shifted. No hesitation, no control, no rigid discipline. He just let it happen, the way the young wolves in the training yard let it happen, like breathing. One moment he was a man, the next 800 pounds of silver-gray wolf stood on the battlements, his amber eyes steady on mine. Patient. Waiting. My wolf said, "Please." I closed my eyes. I let go. The shift took me like a wave. It hurt, the way stretching a muscle hurts after years of stillness. A bright, singing pain that cracked open something I had sealed shut. And then I was through, and the world exploded into scent and sound and moonlight, and I was standing on 4 legs for the first time in 3 years, shaking, my fur catching the wind, and everything was more. He was there. He pressed his flank against mine, steady, warm, an anchor in a world that had suddenly become too vivid. He waited until I stopped trembling. Then he turned toward the stairs that led down to the forest, and he looked back at me, and his tail moved, just once. I ran. We ran together, through the castle grounds and into the dark trees, and the pack parted for us, their alpha and the healer who had finally remembered what she was. The ground was soft under my paws, the air was cold and clean, and full of pine and earth and him. My wolf was singing, not with words, not with clinical assessments, just a pure, wordless joy that filled every part of me. I had forgotten this. I had forgotten that I was not just hands and herbs and quiet competence. I was this, too. Wind and teeth and speed and the wild, aching freedom of a body that was exactly what it was supposed to be. He matched my pace. He didn't lead. He ran beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and when I stumbled on a root because my legs hadn't done this in 3 years, he slowed without making it obvious. When I found my stride, he matched it again. We ran until the castle was a distant glow behind us and the moon was directly overhead. And then we stopped in a clearing where the grass was silver and the only sound was our breathing. We shifted back in the clearing, both of us, at the same moment, without deciding to. He was breathing hard, his hair wild, grass stains on his knees, looking more alive than I had ever seen him. I was shaking, but not from cold, from the feeling of being whole again. He reached out and brushed a leaf from my hair. His hand stayed, his fingers curling against my temple. "There you are," he said, his voice rough and wondering. "I've been waiting to meet all of you." I tilted my face up. He tilted his down. And this time, when he kissed me, I felt something shift between us that was deeper than any physical transformation. An alignment, a recognition. His mouth moved to my neck, to the curve of my shoulder, and I felt his teeth graze the skin there. Not a kiss, something older, something the wolf in both of us understood. "Yes," I said, and the word came from both of us, me and my wolf, in perfect agreement for the first time in my life. He marked me. A bite, gentle and deliberate, at the place where my shoulder met my neck. The warmth that flooded through me had nothing to do with healing. It was a claim and a promise and a homecoming all at once. And somewhere deep in the castle, the ancient murmuring stones, silent for centuries, began to hum. A low, resonant song that seemed to wrap around us like a blessing. "Mine," said every line of his body. "Mine," said every beat of my heart. My wolf, satisfied beyond all clinical expression. "The bond is complete. All vital signs are optimal. I am going to sleep now. You don't need me for what comes next." "Thank you," I told her, silently. You're welcome. Also, his resting heart rate around you has never once been below 90. I just want you to know that. Good night. Our life found its rhythm. Not the careful, performative rhythm of fake diagnoses, but a real one, messy and warm and full of laughter. He shifted freely now. Morning patrol runs with his wolves, evening walks with me in wolf form, carrying my satchel in his jaws like a very large, very dignified retriever. He would shift back with grass in his hair and a looseness in his shoulders that I had never seen in the man who sat on the throne. Marcus Vance got his raise. His budget for the Alpha's Jubilee now included a standing line item for unforeseen romantic shenanigans and a bulk order for replacement clothing. He was, despite everything, happy for his king. He just wished his king would stop ruining shirts. One afternoon, I was in my clinic, restocking shelves, when I heard the heavy pad of paws on stone. I turned. An 800-pound silver-gray wolf stood in the doorway, one massive front paw lifted tragically off the ground, amber eyes wide with feigned agony. I folded my arms. He whimpered. A masterpiece. It's been 6 months, I said. You are the Alpha King. You are mated. You have no medical reason to be here. He whimpered again and held the paw higher. Your paw is fine. He limped forward magnificently, collapsing with theatrical grace onto the clinic floor and resting his enormous head on my boots. He looked up at me with an expression of profound, noble suffering. My wolf roused from her nap. Oh, just scratch his ears already. You know you want to. I knelt down beside him. I took his perfectly healthy paw in my hands, and instead of examining it, I scratched behind his ears, right in the spot he could never reach. His eyes closed. The purr started, deep, rumbling. 800 pounds of pure contentment. He shifted back, still on the floor, still close, grinning up at me with his head in my lap. I have a condition, he said. You have a condition I made up, and I've never been healthier. He reached up and tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear. Same time tomorrow? I leaned down and kissed him, upside down, in the middle of my clinic that smelled like hay and antiseptic and us. Same time tomorrow, I confirmed. My wolf, from somewhere deep and warm and content. Diagnosis, permanent. Prognosis, happy. Case closed. Outside, in the courtyard, the murmuring stones hummed on.